Hi, everyone, and welcome to the Itsy Bitsy Zoomcast. This is season 4, episode 3. I'm Liz Charlene Tate. I am the lead coach from Western Mass Professional Development Center. And today our episode is about read alouds and the benefits, the value and the magic, and do screens have a place in read aloud time in the classroom? Sheila, how you doing today?
Good. We're on like a recording stream today, and I've gotten to chat with experts and students, and I'm feeling really excited. My name is Sheila Gould. I'm the Early Childhood Coordinator and Associate Professor of Education at Holyoke Community College, and I also get to supervise student teachers, which is like, amazing. So I have 2 student teachers here today that are going to be hosting this conversation. And it's great because we have both of them are working in different sites, one a center-based and one a public school. So Maya, can you start by introducing yourself and where you're doing your practicum?
Hi, my name is Maya Anthony. I'm doing my practicum at New Hingham Regional Elementary. I work here, so I'm very excited to be doing it here.
Awesome. Lindsay, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm Lindsay Hernandez. I work at the Chickpea Child Development Center as a pre-K teacher.
Thanks, Lindsay.
Thank you.
All right, and our special guest today, David, can you introduce yourself?
Hi, I'm David Feinstein. I'm the literacy educator at the Eric Carle Museum of Picture Book Art. It's really great to be with you all today.
Thanks, David. And last but not least, Megan.
Hi, thanks so much for having me. I'm Megan Dad Lambert. I now run a publishing company called Modern Memoirs, but in my previous life, I too was an educator at the Eric Carle Museum of Picture Book Art, where I developed a storytime approach called the Whole Book Approach.
Well, I have to say, Megan, the students know it because I use your resources when I teach them how to read aloud. We watch you and we talk about your strategies. So it's really kind of cool to have you on the Zoomcast because David actually sent me all your stuff and I've been using it in my class ever since. So thank you for the work you did and for recording it so that more and more students can learn from your expertise.
Oh, that's great. I still do some with Children's Lit, and I just don't have the same kind of structure I used to have when I was at the Carle, but it's wonderful to know that the work is out there and being used.
It is living on, and we're so grateful to have access to it. So the students have been really curious. They've been noticing as they do observations out in the field, they're noticing sometimes that there are programs that maybe the teachers are less confident reading aloud, or they will rely on a screen to play a read aloud. But we're wondering, either from David or Megan, either of you can answer, what magic does happen when you read aloud in person? Like, it's so hard to define, but how would you describe that magic that happens when you read to children in person? It's so hard, I know.
Well, magic was the first word that came to mind. I mean, I know hopefully we'll get into why it's so important too for all of the early learning and early literacy components that come with it. But, for me, the book kind of depends on readers to come alive. And there's this great quote by Louise Rosenblatt: books do not simply happen to people, people also happen to books. So it's like the book is sitting there on its shelf. It's full of potential and possibility. But it's us opening up that book and putting it in the air that really brings it to life, that animates it, that casts its spell on us through its language, through the artwork in the illustrations. So, I love reading alone, but when I read with others, it becomes communal. Right. And there's a long tradition of that. Right. Our storytelling begins orally as a society, as humanity. But when we read with books, right, that space where meaning exists, right, between us and the book, it opens up. Right. And that's when the magic to me starts to happen. It becomes a living, breathing space that gets opened up with all kinds of possibilities for storytelling in so many different ways.
I guess I would add to that, that in my work, I try to think about the difference between reading to children and reading with children. And reading to children, there is more of the kind of performance element. And there are a lot of wonderful things that can emerge from that sort of storytelling. But what I really love to do is to read with children, by which I mean I am not telling the story to children. I see myself more as the conduit through which kids receive the book. And then the magic for me is what kids bring to it, what they see in the art, what they have to say about the story. So whenever I read with children, I do not expect a quiet group that's going to sit still and listen from beginning to end. In fact, that's a little bit of a nightmare for me. What I want is children giving me their responses, asking questions, and really creating something that is more than the story or the art itself, but that is centering the children's responses.
Lindsay, I know something that you were curious about is like, where's the balance between keeping the story moving? You know, you were kind of curious, like, how much do I let them add? Do you want to share a little bit about your curiosity there?
Yeah, so there's always a balance between, keeping the tone of the environment and the group of students calm enough where they're all listening and really engaged and paying attention. And I really like to open it up to their questions, like ask them a lot of open-ended questions. And like she was saying, just see what their point of view is, see what they're getting out of the text and what they're getting out of the illustrations. And there's so many other, skills that they're learning. It's really important for me in my classroom to read aloud in person to them, creating bonds, helps them, strengthen their prediction skills and their language and literacy skills and comprehension. I mean, the list just goes on and on with the skills they're learning. So I definitely try to stay away from screens as much as possible.
Yeah.
Well,
go ahead, Megan. Sorry.
No, that's okay. Just listening to Lindsay's response. One thing I would want to add is that it's just fun too. That you want the read aloud experience to be not only serving all of those really important goals that you have as a classroom teacher, but also, or academic goals, but also just to give something pleasurable and joyful and stimulating to your group. It should never feel, I don't think, like you're just trying to finish it or get through a book, but instead
Absolutely.
that the book is like a meeting place for all of you to come together and to enjoy yourselves while you're also building skills.
Yeah, definitely. It's one of my favorite times of the day, honestly. I love doing the reading aloud.
And I'd like to build on that too, just thinking about that idea of play, especially Lindsay, I think you mentioned you're in a pre-K classroom, which is my previous lifetime before winding up at the Carl. I was a preschool teacher with 2s and 3s for 7 years.
Awesome.
And yeah, so I wish I had Megan, your book when I was in the classroom, because reading picture books with children has totally changed the way I look at picture books and sharing them. And that idea of fun, right? And the kind of possibility and not necessarily knowing what's going to happen, kind of opening up that space and leaving it for the kids to fill, right? Maybe that's part of the kind of questioning, Sheila, that you introduced us with this kind of, well, how much, right? How do I find that balance? I think that for some of us, if I rewind to myself as a pre-K classroom teacher, 15 years ago now, right? I was probably a little nervous about giving over that control, right? And right, it's really fascinating rethinking our place as the adult, as the quote unquote authority figure. And the book becomes this really level playing field where we are just kind of facilitating that conversation or that play. And I think, to go with the research, right, as far as I know, in terms of literacy too, right, it's really that rich interaction that is so crucial to especially early literacy, right? That quality over quantity, right? So, Megan mentioned that pressure to finish the book, which I think we all feel, but right, that joy, the fact that young kids are enjoying that time with the book is probably the best starting point, right? Because that's going to lead to all of the other motivation to pick up all those other skills, right? And play can look like a lot of different things. I mean, maybe we'll talk about this when we get to the screen, but the kind of nonverbal play that can happen with picture books is also really crucial too.
I think it's interesting how you kind of segue that into the screen, because I was watching David. We watched a lot of your read alouds during the pandemic. I got to say, we were like, when is David going to read again? Please, we need David to read again. Because, as parents, my husband and I were working full time with a 3-year-old, and we love to read to her, but gosh, that time was a nightmare. And your screen-based read alouds, as needed at that time, were really a godsend for us. But you did this thing, and I probably sounds weird that I like super analyzed you, but you were very Mr. Rogers like in the way you utilized pauses and the way you utilized your eye contact with the camera. Because I can envision, and I know this was true for my daughter, that the child felt welcome to interact with you, even though there was that screen barrier. So it was more than a YouTube video of a person reading. There was this connection there. So like Maya, I know you're in a public school and you have really noticed that there are screens in preschool classrooms in the public school. What are your questions around that? Around like, when do I read aloud? When do I rely on a screen? Like, do you have some questions there for Megan and David?
Well, personally, I feel like we use like the Storytime Online, and then we do read alouds throughout the day, depending on the day of some of our kids, because we have a lot of kids at different levels. And I've noticed actually a lot of times reading aloud, I feel like it gets our classroom together instead of just looking at a screen, but the kids are actually more engaged, even if they're not looking. Like we have a lot of kids that we give like fidget toys to or whatever, even if they're not looking at you or hearing, but like the tone of your voice and just the pictures in the book help some of our nonverbal kids able to like picture what's happening. So I feel like read alouds give like that bigger picture. It also helps like the children to hear like different like vocal, like even if they're not like able to like vocalize, but like I have a little child that like Sue, like when you're reading and he hears the tone of your voice, he really focuses in on what you're doing. And then he'll like point to the picture and he'll say like certain words that he knows. He'll be like, oh, piggy, and like certain stuff. And I feel like he's really, versus when you are doing like a read aloud on there, like the tone I feel like just isn't the same. And I feel like the kids are zoned in, but are they really knowing what's going on? So I feel like a read aloud helps give like a bigger picture for them to explore on, to like make sense of the world and create like help with their language and development.
Maya, you had me, I just had this flashback memory to, gosh, I think this was years ago, but there was this kiddo that when we were doing circle time or book reading, he needed to be under a table. And we had one, and he would go under there, and that was fine with us, me and my co-teacher. But he would be under there, and sometimes he would need to put his feet on it and kind of pressure, like feel the pressure pushing against this heavy table. And but every once in a while, as one of us was reading a story, he would just chime in from under the table. And we sort of that was what he needed to do. But he was absolutely listening. But if somebody was to walk by and see, they wouldn't know that. But we did. And it took patience and trust in that process to allow that to happen. And David, earlier you were talking about this idea of control, and it took time to learn that I didn't need to control all those pieces while reading a story. And it was really thrilling the first time that he chimed in and he somehow had made a connection to something in the story, to something that was happening in his life. And it just sort of affirmed for us, it's fine that he's under the table. It doesn't matter. He's participating and he's with us.
Because I feel like oftentimes we think that like, oh, they need to be sitting on the rug, or like we have a couple kids who sit in chairs. But I feel like at sometimes like our large group is very chaotic when we're doing read alouds, but I feel like children that are like standing or at the other side of the room sitting at the table are the children chiming in that like know literally the whole book and remember everything. So it's like taking me a little bit to like adjust to that. Like the kids don't need to be sit, like, if they need to stand, that's what their needs are. It's important.
Us too.
to make
Yeah,
note.
it's been the same thing in our classroom. We've been just trying to implement more freedom over their body and not trying to control their positions as much. And I did notice a big difference.
I wonder, Megan and David, if you can kind of talk about Maya's curiosity around the difference between children's reactions when she does a screen-based read aloud versus an in-person read aloud.
Well, I think it comes back to the distinction between reading to children and reading with children. That when you're playing a story on a screen, that is an act of reading to children. The children are put in a more passive position where they are receiving the story as it is delivered and at that prescribed pace. I mean, you can pause a video or you can slow it down or rewind, but pretty much you're getting it as it's coming off of the screen. Whereas when you're reading aloud, you have the opportunity to create space for the child to interject questions and comments, or for the child to go under the table if they need to go under the table. And it just creates more of a meeting place, really, for the adult and the children as they come together in the book. And emotionally, I think what that does for kids is it creates a sense of social bonding, not just with the teacher, but also with their peers, because you're all really sharing in an experience because you're making that experience. You're not the passive recipients of that experience. And that, I think, is so important to community building and also to validation on an individual level of who these young people are as they bring their knowledge and their strengths and their curiosity to the reading transaction.
Yeah, I feel like it's also like important. It's helpful for like teachers to see kind of like where the students' comprehension levels at, and like where like they might be, you might not understand when they're watching something, like, are they really processing it? Like what's going on? But like when you're interacting with them, sitting there doing that read aloud, and you can kind of see like where the students' comprehension is.
Imagination is a big thing too. Like from screens, they can't really use their imagination at all, or, but with read alouds, it's like constant imagination. What's going to happen next? Thinking about the questions and just complete engagement.
I just wanted to build on, first of all, Sheila, thank you for the kind words. I'm so happy that people are out there watching and engaging. Mr. Rogers is a pretty high bar, but what that is just me trying to replicate as much as possible, right? The kind of reading with kids that Megan is talking about, which, and Megan, right, that reading with children, that whole book approach is so central to what we do in live story times at the museum. So it really is just trying as hard as we can to translate that, which really is just leaving those gaps, asking those questions, kind of mimicking it, but it is nowhere near the kind of rich, fun, collaborative, genuine collaboration that happens when we're reading in person, where there is that honest back and forth. But I do want to kind of challenge some of the stigmas of screens, because, to go back to the example that Liz shared of the child who needs to be under the desk or moving their bodies. Maybe it's more relevant to folks reading at home than in a classroom setting. But when I go into play groups or early childhood centers, right, one of the advantages I've found of doing these kind of collaborative story times, some of them are live, so people are interacting genuinely. You can see everyone's living room, and everyone is engaging in slightly different ways. I've actually noticed that the adults, the caregivers, are actually much more comfortable and at ease because they're not as anxious about their child's behavior or about how that movement or sound might be affecting other readers. So there is that flexibility in terms of how are we going to choose how we engage with this story time. You can leave and come back. You can shout at the screen as much as you want, hopefully a lot. And the other thing is actually, and I've heard this in a lot of workshops that we do with early childhood educators, what the screen does for visual literacy. Books are beautiful, holding that book and talking about the parts of the book, which we try to do as much as possible in these virtual programs, is great. But you think about the physical challenges of the book, which are who can see? How do I get everyone in the room to see? So what I've heard a lot of early childhood educators telling me that they've been doing is putting it up on the screen with a document reader, even if they are not watching a video, but so everyone in the room can really look very closely at the pictures and talk about what they see happening in the pictures. So I actually think there have been some unexpected positives in terms of really highlighting the visibility and the illustration and all of those verbal visual literacy skills that we're building.
What a smart use of media. I really like, we have a document camera downstairs and I've really never thought to use it that way. And you can even draw on the projection in most rooms and circle and have kids point to things. That's a really interesting way to think about it. David, you made me totally think about things really differently. I'm so glad that you pushed back a little bit. And that's exactly what we hope from these episodes. And during this episode, I wish we weren't itsy bitsy, but we are itsy bitsy and we have to wrap up. But I have to say, you have given so much advice and encouragement to those people who are nervous to read aloud, because it is a vulnerable place to be the one doing the reading. And I think now, knowing how meaningful and beautiful it is to make those connections with your students through reading with them, thank you for that language, Megan, more people will be encouraged to pick up that book and be the one that reads, and maybe show the pictures on their projector so everyone can see. I love that suggestion, David. Liz, do you want to wrap us up?
Oh my goodness. This is, I haven't said a lot because it's been so wonderful listening to everybody. And yeah, thank you, David, for how you turned us in that direction, looking at the value, or thinking about the value of screens. You're making me think about the times when, how many times have you heard, I can't see. And what if the pictures were behind you even, so that kids could see the book? And anyway, but thank you all for being a part of this conversation. I wish we could plan a part 2, and maybe we will, because it would be lovely to have you back on. It's been just wonderful to be a part of this with all of you. So thank you so much.
And thank you to my students who do this on their lunch break, working in understaffed programs. They're amazing. And thank you to your directors and principals who let you join.
Yes, you're welcome. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks so much,
everyone.
for having me.
Thank you for having us.
Bye-bye.
Bye.